On the night my son was born, my husband disappeared without a trace. I searched, desperate to find him, only to uncover a truth more cruel than death itself. He had stolen our child and arranged my murder. My body was dumped like trash into a cold, stinking lake, his last words ringing in my ears. You killed the woman I loved. Now take your baby and go die. This time I would smile, I would play along, and I would hand him the rope to hang himself. Fully. Publicly. Mercilessly. The words struck me like shards of glass, sharp and cutting, though I had already bled from them once before. Cassie, that's enough. Besides threatening me with the baby, is there anything else you even know how to do? Adrian's voice thundered across the room, righteous and unyielding, as though he were a judge delivering a final verdict. Have I spoiled you to the point that you've forgotten how to be reasonable? I froze. My body went still, but inside something far stranger stirred. Because I knew these words. Every syllable. Every pause. They weren't new. They weren't happening for the first time. They were echoes of a nightmare I had already lived. A cold tide rushed through me, spreading from my chest to the very tips of my fingers. My hand instinctively moved to my belly, to the gentle swell beneath my dress. The baby stirred faintly within, and relief slammed into me so fiercely I almost wept. Alive. He was alive. I had been reborn. The realization was like lightning. Wild, searing, impossible. My throat constricted, my chest burned, and still, beneath it all, I felt a grim, unyielding certainty. I was back at the very beginning, at the place where all my suffering had started. And Adrian was here, standing before me, not yet crippled, not yet disgraced, not yet unmasked. His eyes blazed with that familiar fire, the one I once mistook for conviction but now recognized as vanity dressed in moral armor. There's a shortage of doctors on the front lines, he continued, his tone lofty, each word dipped in self-sacrifice. Soldiers are risking their lives to protect this country. This is my way of serving. If you can't support me, fine. But to use the baby to chain me down? When did you become so selfish? In my last life, his words had pierced me and I had believed them. I'd been 9 months pregnant, exhausted, desperate, but still I had tried to reason with him. I had begged, pleaded, argued. I had thought if I loved him enough he would bend. But Adrian Blackwell had never been a man who bent. He was a man who broke others. I remembered the way he had traded night shifts to avoid me. The way he had vanished even as my contractions tore me apart. The way my son had arrived into this world small and weak while his father was nowhere to be found. And then the end, my blood staining the floor, my baby ripped from my arms, Adrian's voice condemning me to death as if I had chosen it myself. You liked using death as a threat, didn't you? He had said coldly as they dumped us into the lake like garbage. Then take the kid and go die. If it weren't for you, I would have saved Lily. You killed her. So join her. The memory surged so vividly I felt bile rise in my throat. My body shook with rage I barely contained. Not this time. This time I would not scream or beg. This time I would not cling to the illusion that love could save us. I lifted my gaze to him slowly, deliberately. So you've already decided? Adrian faltered, just a flicker before straightening. I have. He mistook my calm for surrender, his shoulders loosening with triumph. In another life I would have cried then, begging him to stay. But now I only let a faint, humorless smile brush my lips. Then there's nothing left to argue about, I said softly. That startled him. He wasn't expecting me to agree so easily. His eyes narrowed, searching my face. You're finally being sensible. Sensible. I wanted to laugh at the irony. He thought he had won. He thought I was meekly accepting his grand decision, the noble doctor sacrificing for his country. He didn't know I had already seen the ending of this play. He didn't know I knew his real motive. The woman named Lillian Moore, his precious first love, the ghost he could never let go of. In my last life I had been his scapegoat. This time I would be his downfall. I lowered my head, pressing my palm protectively against my belly, and let the silence stretch between us. Inside a storm raged, but my face was still. I would not let him see even a crack. You think you're walking toward glory, Adrian. But all you're walking toward is the ruin you carved for yourself. And this time I'll make sure the world watches you burn. Adrian's words still rang in my ears long after he stormed out of the bedroom. When did you become this selfish? In my last life I had broken under the weight of that accusation. I had cried, pleaded, and begged him to stay. I had let my love for him drown out my instincts. And in return he had abandoned me, abandoned our baby, abandoned everything we had built. All for Lily Moore, the ghost he could never bury. Not this time. This time I would play his game. Smile when he expected tears. Nod when he expected screams. Let him believe he had already won while I sharpened my blade behind my back. That evening he paced the room like a man preparing for the stage. His coat draped across a chair, his medical bag open on the bed. He moved with the brisk confidence of someone convinced he was righteous. "Cassie," he said abruptly, "don't look at me with those eyes. I know you're angry, but in time you'll understand." I raised my brows, schooling my voice into soft compliance. "You're right. I overreacted earlier. I shouldn't have tried to hold you back. If this is what you believe you must do, I'll support you." The effect was immediate. His shoulders relaxed, his expression softened into smug relief. "Finally," he muttered. "At least you're coming to your senses." Inside I almost laughed. It was that easy. One shift in tone, one false concession, and he already believed me conquered. "Adrian," I added, lowering my gaze, "just one thing. You should tell your parents, and mine. They deserve to know." He stiffened. "Why? You want to make me look irresponsible?" I shook my head, allowing a tremor to lace my voice. "No. But war is dangerous. If something happens, at least they'll have heard it from you, not through rumors." For the briefest second, his eyes flickered, not with guilt but with hesitation. Then he placed a hand on my shoulder, squeezing just enough to play the part of a caring husband. "Cassie, don't worry. It's only a month. I'll be back before the baby is born." How confident he was, as if life and death could be scheduled like a train timetable. I tilted my head, pressing my palm against my stomach. "Then all the more reason. Please, Adrian. For me." He sighed, clearly annoyed but unwilling to argue further. "Fine. I'll tell them." Inside, victory glowed. The first seed had been planted. The next morning I acted. I requested a driver and went to the hospital. My body was heavy with pregnancy, but my determination carried me through the sterile corridors. In my last life I hadn't come here until it was too late. I had ignored the dizziness, the tightening cramps, the heavy drag of exhaustion, because I'd been too busy chasing a man who didn't care if I lived or died. Not this time. "I'd like to be admitted," I told the nurse firmly. She blinked. "Admitted? Are you experiencing complications?" "I've been under stress," I said carefully, lowering my lashes. "The baby feels unsettled. I don't want to take risks." After an examination, the doctor confirmed my suspicion. The baby's position wasn't ideal. Stress could indeed cause problems. "Staying here a while is wise," the doctor said kindly. Perfect. Being admitted meant that when both families arrived, they wouldn't find me at home waiting helplessly. They would find me in a hospital bed, monitors beeping steadily, nurses bustling around, the image of a fragile mother abandoned by her husband. It was almost laughably easy. Adrian didn't know I was here. He didn't imagine that his heavily pregnant wife would take such steps. That's why he was careless. I was walking back from a routine test when I heard his voice down the hall. The door was ajar, his tone lowered but not enough to hide. "Adrian, have you really thought this through?" a male voice asked. "That place is dangerous. Is it worth it, just to see Lily one more time?" My heart stopped. There it was. Her name. Silence stretched for a beat, then Adrian's voice, solemn, pious, drenched in false nobility. "Back then I wasn't there. She died alone. I can't let that happen again." I pressed my palm against the wall to steady myself, my lips twisting into a bitter smile. So this was the truth behind his grand speeches. Not patriotism. Not selfless duty. Just a man chasing a ghost of first love. My stomach tightened, but not from fear. From rage. This time I would not confront him directly. This time I would let him dig his own grave. Later that afternoon when he stepped out, I searched his things. My hands shook, not from nerves but from anticipation. I found it tucked between his notes. A thin sheet of paper, the ink faded, the handwriting delicate. "Adrian," it read. "Fate is cruel. By the time you see this, I may already be gone. I don't regret saving others, but I regret not seeing you one last time. If destiny allows, perhaps we'll meet again in another life." It wasn't even a love letter. Just a farewell written in haste. But to Adrian it was a holy scripture. A reason to abandon his wife, his unborn child, his vows. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my bag. Evidence. Proof. Weapon. The hospital room was too bright. The kind of sterile, buzzing brightness that magnified every flaw, every shadow. I lay propped up against the pillows, monitors beeping steadily beside me, my hand resting protectively on my belly. The door creaked open. Cassie. My mother, Helena, rushed in first, her face pale, her hands trembling as they grasped mine. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Look at you, staying here alone, carrying all this by yourself. You'll drive me to an early grave, child. Her voice cracked at the edges, a mixture of relief and reproach. My father, Victor, followed close behind, steady as always, though I could see the tight line of his jaw. I didn't want you to worry, I whispered. It was the truth. In my last life, I hadn't wanted them to see how ugly things had gotten between Adrian and me. I'd thought I was protecting them. Instead, I had left them grieving, searching, breaking. Not this time. Before either of them could ask further, the door swung open again. Heavy footsteps, the smell of expensive perfume, and then Beatrice and Charles Blackwell swept into the room like they owned the place. Beatrice's voice cut through the air like a whip. Where's Adrian? Don't tell me he's already gone. Her sharp eyes landed on me. Cassandra, seriously? You're his wife. Couldn't you even stop him a little? Absolutely useless. The words struck as they always did. Sharp, dismissive, dismissing not just me but everything I had endured. In my last life I had lowered my head, cheeks burning with shame. I had believed her. Believed that somehow it was my fault Adrian was slipping through my fingers, my fault he abandoned our child, my fault he killed me. But this wasn't my last life. This time I let the insult hang in the air. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I simply stared back at her, my expression calm, my silence deliberate. Beatrice faltered for half a second, clearly not expecting resistance in the form of composure. She doubled down, her lips curling. Don't look at me like that. If you had even a shred of ability, you would have convinced him to stay home. But no, he walks all over you because you're too weak to. Beatrice. My mother's voice sliced across hers, sharper than I had ever heard it. That's enough. The room stilled. Helena Hale rarely raised her voice, but when she did, it commanded attention. She stepped closer, shielding me with her body as if she could physically block Beatrice's words from reaching me. Emily's pregnant, she snapped. 9 months along. How exactly do you expect her to control your grown son? Should she chain him to the bedpost? Should she drag him back from the station herself? He's about to be a father and he chooses to abandon his wife and child, and you dare blame her. My father's deep voice rumbled next, low and unyielding. Helena's right. Adrian's legs are his own. If he chooses to walk away, that's on him. Don't you dare put that on our daughter. Beatrice's mouth opened, then closed again. Her face flushed red, her composure cracking under the weight of my parents' fury. Charles Blackwell shifted uncomfortably beside her, his eyes darting anywhere but the confrontation. He had always been like that, silent, complicit, weak. I leaned back against the pillows, a small smile tugging at my lips. My parents were my shield this time. I didn't need to raise my voice, didn't need to prove my worth by groveling for approval that would never come. Inside, though, a darker satisfaction simmered. Beatrice had always called me useless. She wielded the word like a curse, spitting it at me whenever Adrian defied her expectations. And I, foolish and naive, had believed it. Not anymore. I wasn't useless. I was patient. And patience was a blade sharper than she could imagine. As Beatrice huffed and turned away, I let my thoughts wander back to my past life. Back then, my relationship with the Blackwells had been lukewarm. Never warm, never cruel enough to sever, just the tepid temperature of polite obligation. I was tolerated, not cherished. A compromise, not a choice. Beatrice had made it clear she thought I was a convenient wife, someone steady enough to keep Adrian from his reckless impulses, but never someone worthy of her son's whole heart. And I had accepted that. How pathetic I had been, mistaking crumbs for a feast, mistaking tolerance for love. Now I saw it clearly. Beatrice had never wanted me as a daughter-in-law. She wanted a leash for Adrian, and when I failed to hold him, she had turned her disappointment into disdain. Absolutely useless, she had called me again and again, until the words echoed inside me like truth. But now the only useless ones were them. Parents who raised a son who could betray, abandon, and kill without remorse. My mother fussed over me, adjusting my blanket, smoothing my hair from my forehead. My father stood by the window, arms crossed, his gaze sharp on the Blackwells. Beatrice muttered something under her breath, but the sting of her words no longer touched me. Because tucked inside my bag, hidden beneath folded clothes, was Lily Moore's letter. Proof. Evidence of Adrian's betrayal. A weapon sharper than any insult Beatrice could throw. I let my fingers brush against the bag lightly, reassured by its weight. This time when the truth came out, I wouldn't be the one humiliated. This time Adrian would be exposed. This time the word useless would never touch me again. The room grew tense with silence, the air thick with everything left unsaid. My parents exchanged worried glances, while the Blackwells simmered in their own frustration. Me. I leaned back, my hand on my stomach, the faint flutter of my child reminding me why I fought. I didn't know when Adrian would walk through that door. But when he did, I would be ready. This time the confrontation wouldn't end with me in tears. This time it would end with him on his knees. The hospital room was thick with tension, the kind that hums beneath the skin like static before a storm. My parents sat close by my bedside, their worry softening every glance. Across the room, Beatrice Blackwell muttered under her breath, her husband Charles silent as always. And then the door slammed open. Adrian strode in, his face flushed with anger, his eyes sharp and accusing. "So that's why you suddenly turned so understanding," he spat, not even sparing a glance at my parents. "You brought them here to speak on your behalf? Cassie, you think dragging in the whole family will change my decision?" He sneered, his voice rising. "Let me tell you something. I'm leaving today. No one's going to stop me." I didn't flinch. Not anymore. Instead, I let out a cold laugh. The sound startled even me, sharp, bitter, cutting through the room like broken glass. "Fine," I said, locking eyes with him. "Since you've made up your mind, divorce or the transfer to the Northern Front, pick one." The words hung in the air like smoke. The room went silent. My mother gasped softly, her hand tightening around mine. My father stiffened, his jaw clenching. Across from them, Beatrice's face drained of color, then flushed red again in rapid waves, as if she couldn't decide whether to faint or explode. Adrian froze. His eyes widened, the fury faltering for a split second as if he hadn't heard me right. "What did you just say?" I sat straighter in the bed, my belly heavy, my hand protectively resting atop it. My voice was calm, deliberate, every word enunciated as though I were carving it into stone. I repeated slowly, "Divorce or the Northern Front. Pick one." His lips twisted. "Cassie, don't joke about things like this." "I'm not joking." And then I reached into my bag. My fingers found the folded sheet of paper, worn at the edges, delicate with someone else's lies. I pulled it free and tossed it onto the blanket between us. The letter slid across the white sheet like a blade being drawn. "You think I don't know?" I asked, my voice low, steady. "All that self-righteous talk about serving the country? Turns out it's just an excuse to go see her." Adrian's eyes dropped to the paper. For a heartbeat, his composure slipped, the mask cracking. Shock rippled across his features, quickly hardening into fury. His voice thundered. "Cassie, you went through my things? You dare?" I chuckled. A dark, humorless sound. "You're angry I found proof of your betrayal? How funny. If you truly believed in your noble cause, you wouldn't need to hide behind false letters and lies." Beatrice jumped to her feet, her voice shrill. "What letter? What is she talking about?" "Sit down," my father growled, his patience worn thin. Adrian's fists clenched at his sides, his chest heaving. "You're unbelievable. You think you can threaten me with a divorce to make me stay? Cassie, you're pathetic." I tilted my head, watching him with cool detachment. "Pathetic? Maybe. But let's see who's really desperate here. If you still care about this marriage, stay. I'll pretend none of this happened. I'm carrying your child after all. Are you really willing to just abandon us?" It was a calculated move. Adrian Blackwell was a man who loathed being controlled. He despised the idea that anyone, wife, parents, fate itself, could dictate his choices. In my past life I had begged and he had crushed me beneath his heel. This time I dangled the illusion of control, daring him to prove his independence. And it worked. Before I had even finished the sentence, his face contorted with rage. His voice boomed, each word tearing through the air. Cassie, stop dreaming. No one can change my decision. Not you, not anyone. My lips curved into a mocking smile. Exactly what I expected. His chest rose and fell rapidly, his breath ragged. My calm only fueled his fury. Then we'll divorce, I said coldly. Let's go now. The room gasped again. Adrian's expression twisted, somewhere between disbelief and fury. For all his bluster, he hadn't expected me to call his bluff, to push past the point of no return. Fine, he spat, his teeth gritted. Let's go now, Cassie. But don't you dare regret this. I won't, I said simply. Regret is for those who lose something they valued. You lost me a long time ago. His eyes darkened, venomous. Beatrice finally snapped out of her shock, shrieking, No. I don't agree. You can't divorce him, not like this. Her voice cracked, her hysteria filling the room, but it was useless. The line had already been crossed. Adrian's fury was my shield now. He had chosen. And this time the choice was exactly what I wanted. The Civil Affairs Bureau smelled of dust and fading ink. A place where lives were split and sewn back together with signatures on paper. I never thought I would stand here, swollen with child, a husband at my side, the two of us waiting to dissolve what had once been vows whispered in love. The clerk glanced at me, her eyes lingering on the curve of my belly, then flicking between us with thinly veiled disapproval. You're 9 months pregnant, she said, her tone cautious. Perhaps you should reconsider. Divorce in this state. Are you sure? I met her gaze evenly. I'm sure. She turned to Adrian, perhaps expecting him to be the voice of reason, the one to protest, to demand time. But Adrian only gave a tight, impatient nod. Process it, he snapped. We don't have all day. The clerk blinked, taken aback, and tried once more. Think carefully, both of you. A child is involved. Do your job, Adrian cut in, his tone sharp, his face set in grim determination. I almost smiled. He was so desperate to prove he wasn't being controlled, so eager to storm forward, that he couldn't even see he was walking straight into my trap. The paperwork began. Forms shuffled across the desk, pens scratching. When it came time to discuss division of assets, I raised my head. The house stays with me and the baby, I said clearly. And I want half the money. For a heartbeat, I expected resistance. In my last life, Adrian had fought me on everything. Every coin, every scrap, as though stripping me bare would heal his pride. But this time he only nodded. Fine. Fine. I blinked, caught off guard. The clerk looked surprised too, her pen hovering midair. Mr. Blackwell, you're agreeing to everything without dispute? Yes. His voice was flat, dismissive. Whatever she wants. I studied him, suspicion prickling beneath my skin. Why was he so compliant? Why was he giving me everything without a fight? And then I saw it, the faint smirk tugging at his lips, the condescension in his eyes. Of course. He didn't believe this was real. To him I was just an emotional, irrational wife lashing out under stress. He thought once he returned from the front, triumphant, noble, pitted, he could reclaim everything. Reclaim me. He thought I would still be waiting. How wrong he was. The clerk hesitated one last time, glancing at me, at my belly, at the silent storm brewing between us. But when neither of us budged, she sighed and pressed the final seal onto the papers. The red stamp bled into the page like a wound, but to me it was liberation. I held the divorce certificate in my hands, the paper thin, the ink fresh. My chest tightened, not with grief, but with something sharp and exhilarating. It was real. The marriage was over. Adrian Blackwell was no longer my husband. I had clawed my way free from the grave fate had dug for me. As we stepped out of the bureau, the afternoon sun was warm, gilding the pavement in gold. For a moment, the world looked almost new, as though it too recognized the shift in my destiny. Adrian stopped, turning to me with an expression I almost laughed at. Tender, soulful, the kind of look that might have melted me years ago. Cassie, he said softly, I know I've wronged you in this. That's why, no matter how unreasonable your demands may seem right now, I'll agree to all of them. He let his gaze fall deliberately to my stomach, his voice dipping into false gentleness. Take good care of yourself and the baby. We'll talk about everything else when I come back. I stared at him, blank, my mind turning over the words. When I come back. The arrogance. The certainty. He still believed this was temporary, that the stamp on our divorce certificate was just ink, that my defiance was nothing but theatrics. He believed he could leave me, betray me, and still return to claim me like some possession waiting on a shelf. I let out a soft, bitter laugh so quiet he didn't catch it. What a fool. Back at the hospital, Adrian packed quickly, moving with the same brisk efficiency that had once made me admire him. I sat on the bed watching silently as he folded shirts, tucked away notes, strapped his bag. He didn't notice the calm on my face, the stillness that came not from resignation but from triumph. "Don't tell my parents yet," he said carelessly, slinging the bag over his shoulder. "I'll send them a letter when I reach the front." I nodded. Of course. He mistook my compliance for loyalty. And then he was gone. I listened to his footsteps fade down the hall, the echo of the man who had once been the axis of my world. Now he was nothing more than a shadow peeling away from me, taking his arrogance with him. Of course, Beatrice wasn't so easily managed. When she returned later and found Adrian gone, her fury was immediate. "Cassie, you're his wife. How could you just let him leave like that?" she snapped, her eyes blazing. "You're supposed to hold him back, not stand by uselessly." Her words tried to dig under my skin, but they barely grazed me. I pressed a hand to my stomach, letting my voice tremble with practiced exhaustion. "We fought so hard over this that I ended up in the hospital. What more could I have done? I thought if you all came you could talk sense into him." But clearly nothing worked. The mention of the baby softened her fury for a moment. Her eyes flickered, her lips pursed. But then she huffed, muttering, "Still, you shouldn't have just stood by." I cut her off with a cold smile. "He made his choice. Whether he lives or dies, that's his responsibility. Not mine." Her face went pale. She sputtered, "Cassie, how can you be so heartless?" I laughed quietly. "Heartless? My husband abandoned me and his unborn child to chase a dead woman's shadow. Tell me again who's heartless." The room went silent. For once, Beatrice had no answer. That night, when the hospital grew quiet and my parents finally dozed in the chairs beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The divorce certificate rested in the drawer of my bedside table. Every so often I would reach out, touch it, trace the embossed seal with my fingertip. Proof. It was real. I thought of the lake where I had once sunk, the icy weight of my baby in my arms, Adrian's voice condemning me to death. And then I thought of today. The pen scratching across paper, the clerk's stamp sealing my freedom, Adrian's arrogance as he walked away. The difference was vast and the victory was mine. The first trap had been sprung. Adrian was gone. The divorce was real. And for the first time in 2 lives I could breathe. 2 weeks later, under the blinding white of hospital lights, I brought my son into the world. I had been terrified, not of the pain but of the memories. In my past life, my son had been born too small, too frail, his cries thin and reedy, each breath a battle. My body had failed me, torn apart by exhaustion and grief, leaving me bleeding and broken. I had clutched him to my chest, trembling with fear, while Adrian was nowhere to be found. But this time was different. When his first cry rang out, loud and strong, the sound filled the room like sunlight spilling through a storm. Tears blurred my vision as the doctor placed him in my arms. "Congratulations," the doctor said warmly. "A very healthy baby boy." Healthy. The word undid me. My throat burned, my chest ached, and I pressed my lips to his tiny forehead again and again. "My baby," I whispered, my tears wetting his soft skin. "My sweet boy. You're safe. You're strong." My mother wept quietly at my side, her hands steady as she stroked my hair. "Cassie, he's perfect. Look at him." I looked. And for the first time in 2 lives I allowed myself to believe it. I had changed fate. The days that followed blurred in a haze of gentle exhaustion. But unlike before, I wasn't alone. My mother stayed with me, caring for me with the devotion only she could give. She made broth, tucked blankets around me, held the baby when my arms grew heavy. Her presence softened the sharp edges of the hospital walls. And my son, he grew stronger each day, his tiny fists curling, his cries full of life. I marveled at every sound, every stretch, every blink of his dark eyes. At night, when the world grew quiet, I held him close and whispered promises. "I'll never let him hurt you. You'll never know the kind of father he really was. You'll grow up loved. Always loved." It was 3 days after my son's birth when my mother returned from a hushed conversation in the hall. Her face was conflicted, part grim, part strangely satisfied. "Cassie," she said slowly, "have you heard?" "Heard what?" I asked, rocking the baby gently. "Adrian, he's back." My body stiffened. "Back." She nodded. "But not as he left. He returned injured, both legs gone. They say it happened while trying to save Lily Moore." The name twisted in the air, sharp and bitter. My lips curled into a cold smile. How fitting. My mother sighed. "There's more. Word is, he can't have children anymore. The injury was that severe." I paused, my eyes dropping to the baby nestled in my arms. So that was why his mother had been so desperate to drag me back, to glue together a marriage already shattered. Adrian had lost not just his legs but his lineage. "Poetic," I murmured. The hospital corridors buzzed with whispers. Nurses, patients, even visitors. Everyone was talking about Adrian Blackwell. He had everything, a stable job, a beautiful wife, a child on the way. And he gave it all up for his first love. Look at him now. Crippled. Humiliated. If that's not karma, what is? I overheard the laughter, the pity, the disdain. Each word was a balm to wounds that had once been too deep to heal. In my past life I had been the one mocked, abandoned, painted as the villain. Now the roles were reversed. Now he was the spectacle, the walking joke. When I heard someone say he had fainted from rage upon hearing the gossip, I couldn't help but laugh. How ironic. Adrian Blackwell, the man who once cared so much about appearances, now reduced to a crippled shadow, drowning in humiliation. Of course, Beatrice didn't stay away for long. She barged into my room, her voice sharp with accusation. "Cassie, what kind of wife are you? Adrian's been back for days and you haven't visited him once. Not even a glance. What daughter-in-law acts like this? You gave birth. Fine, but stop hiding behind your excuses. He's in pain and you're sitting here pretending you're delicate." Her words rolled over me like stale wind. I didn't even flinch. I placed the baby carefully in my mother's arms and stood, smoothing my gown. Then I met Beatrice's glare with a calm smile. "You're right. I should go see him," I said lightly. "But not for the reason you think." Her eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "I'll see him," I said, my voice dropping to a cold whisper. "Because after everything he put me through, I want to see with my own eyes just how pathetic he's become." Beatrice's face drained of color. Later that night, when the baby finally slept, I sat by the window, the divorce certificate resting in my lap. The moonlight spilled across the paper, illuminating the seal, the lines that separated me forever from Adrian Blackwell. I traced the letters with my fingertip, my heart steady, my breathing calm. Adrian had lost his legs, his pride, his future. And soon he would lose the last shred of control he thought he had over me. Because I was no longer his wife. I was free. And this time I would protect that freedom with everything I had. By the time I left Adrian's hospital room that day, I thought the story was over. I had divorced him. I had protected my child. I had watched him lose everything he once valued. But fate, it seemed, had one final act to play. Beatrice Blackwell did what she always did best. Cling. Cling to her pride, to her son, to whatever shreds of reputation she thought remained. When whispers spread of Lily Moore still lingering near Adrian, Beatrice pounced. She who had once despised Lily, who had schemed and insulted and raged at the very mention of her, now bowed her head and begged Lily to marry him. Out of gratitude, she told people. She owes him her life. He lost his legs saving her. She must repay the debt. And Lily agreed. I heard the news from my mother one quiet evening, my son asleep in his cradle, the warm scent of milk and talc filling the room. "Adrian and Lily are married," she said carefully, watching my face. I smiled, a small sharp curve of my lips. How poetic. He destroyed his family, abandoned his child for that woman, and now he's tied to her forever. Exactly what he wanted. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The knock came late at night, heavy and urgent. My father answered, and the uniformed men at the door wasted no time. "Mrs. Hale, we need you at the station." My stomach turned, my arms instinctively wrapping around my son. "Why?" "It concerns Adrian Blackwell and his wife Lillian Moore." At the station the truth spilled out like poison. Lily was no grieving lover. No noble nurse. No selfless woman caught in war's cruelty. She was an undercover agent. A foreign spy who had lured Adrian north and used him to treat enemy soldiers. The Blackwell name was dragged through the mud. Adrian's so-called sacrifice was revealed as treachery, albeit unknowing. Both he and Lily were sentenced to death by firing squad. I felt no shock. Only relief. Relief that the last thread tying me to him was finally cut. Cassie, an officer said hesitantly, Adrian is demanding to see you. He says he'll only share information if you come. For a moment I almost refused. What could he possibly say that mattered to me anymore? But then, curiosity won. When I entered the interrogation room he was already there, shackled, his body frail, his eyes bloodshot. For a moment I almost didn't recognize him. This was not the proud doctor I had once loved, the man who had condemned me to death. This was a husk. And yet when his eyes met mine, they burned with a feverish intensity. Cassie, he rasped. Did you come back to life too? My heart skipped. He knew. I schooled my face into confusion, tilting my head. What are you talking about? Don't lie to me. His voice cracked wild. You were different. From the very start. You knew things you shouldn't. You turned everything against me. You were reborn, weren't you? You came back to take revenge on me. The officer beside me shifted uneasily, frowning. I widened my eyes, letting fear and confusion paint my features. Revenge? Rebirth? Adrian, what are you saying? Are you mad? Don't play dumb with me. He lunged forward, the chains rattling, his face twisted with desperation. You knew about Lily. You knew everything. Admit it. I stepped back, curling my arms protectively around myself, feigning terror. He's lost his mind, I whispered to the officer. The officer's jaw tightened. That's enough, Blackwell. Adrian roared, but his words dissolved into incoherent curses. His eyes darted wildly, his voice cracking as he shouted about rebirth, betrayal, fate. To the world he sounded like a madman. And that was exactly what he became. Declared unstable. Discredited. Silenced. His final truth drowned under the weight of his own hysteria. The day of the execution dawned bright and cloudless. Crowds gathered, whispers rising like smoke. Some came for justice. Others for spectacle. I didn't go. Instead I sat on the balcony of my home, my son nestled in my arms. The sun warmed his skin, his small lips curled into a smile, his tiny hands grasping at the air. I kissed him again and again, my tears falling freely this time, not of grief but of release. It's finally over, I whispered into his soft hair. The man who hurt us is gone from this world. My sweet baby, you can grow up in peace now. He cooed softly as if answering. And for the first time in 2 lives I felt whole. The end.